stuck here. The cops won't bother me.
Whenever I get, hey, look, a motorcycle, a BMW. Look, a little, he's probably retired. All of those guys that ride BMWs, they're kind of fossilized. There's nothing uncooler than a BMW, but at least that guy is riding in the winter. A lot of posers that ride BMWs do not ride in the winter. Well, anyway, guys, you know, this thing has got 63,000 miles. And it's been so freaking reliable. You know, I've had other bikes that I put a lot of miles on them. I've had Hondas that I put like 120,000 miles on them. Ninja 250s, you know, I think the most I put was 87,000 on an 08. Really excellent bikes. I do love riding motorcycles, but the thing is, this Vstrom is a little bit better than most motorcycles, I think. First of all, the looks are kind of bland, and I've never been a fan of Vstroms or Suzuki for that matter, because they don't design things to be kind of edgy and a little bit more contemporary. I would say that this is bland. What's that guy doing over there? Looks aside, and I've talked to you guys a lot about Vstroms. This thing is fantastic. Whenever I get on this bike and I turn it on, that V-twin engine just sounds so good. And I've never been a fan of V-twins. I've owned, I think right now I own another one. It's a Africa Twin. And I have to admit that this Vstrom is a better bike than a old Africa Twin. I have a 95 and that engine is not as good as this one. The other engine sounds good too, but it's all about the V-twins, man. The V-twin just sounds so good. And I've heard of guys on Vstrom 650s that have put like hundreds of thousands of miles on them, and I can believe it. The one thing that you get when you get on this bike is you get quality, which is not something that you would think that a Japanese maker would be doing, but it feels like a bike that you can keep for a very long time. It's a good combination of power and reliability, and it seems like it's a bike that you can keep for a very long time because the way it rides is almost timeless. The engine, the V-twin engine, makes torque in such a way that it makes it a fun bike to ride all throughout. Like on the street, this thing just feels so good. The power is exactly where you need it to be. And I've ridden 1000s and 1300 cc's, and those bikes make almost a little bit too much power. But I love power, but also when you get more power, it starts to consume more gas. It starts to wear out your tires more. This Vstrom, it doesn't have a lot of power. I believe it's like 60 horsepower, not a lot. And I still get over 50 miles to the gallon on it. And that's a V-twin. V-twins are not as efficient as inline 2s because, I don't know, I guess that's just the way it goes. And it's so comfortable. This is the type of bike that you could ride to work every single day for the rest of your life. It can commute and not have any problems. And what I like about it, of course, these bikes, they're upright. You sit almost like a lazy boy. It's kind of like a very good amount of visibility. And when you ride sport bikes and you kind of like are leaned in, it's hard to turn your neck because the way your neck wants to turn is horizontally to your vertebrae, so you kind of look up instead. But this, you're upright, your neck is upright. It's a much more natural position. And I think that's why I recommend ADV bikes, and I think that's why the ADV motorcycle segment is much more popular than a lot of the motorcycle segments these days. It's the only segment that's growing while everything else is just kind of dwindling, because it's all about the experience of riding, and I think that's what people like. it's like you take a motorcycle and you go across a continent, or you go to a different country, you rent a motorcycle. The adventure is more important than the bike, but a bike lets you do the job comfortably. This thing at 650 is the perfect size. The only issue that I have with the 650 is that I wish that Suzuki would put a shaft drive on this bike, and I know people have given me grief about that comment, but I just don't like changing chains. There's nothing wrong with chains, and I know that it would be heavier, more complex, but I'm fine with that. A middleweight shaft drive would be perfect, so I wouldn't have to constantly changing shaft drive or chains. Is just how comfortable this thing. I've ridden with a passenger from Utah to DC, you know, and it does fairly well. The seat is nice and wide, but also keep in mind it's not a dual sport. It'll cope with gravel roads, but it's not going to be in the same league that an Africa Twin, a KTM, or even a BMW GS is in. And I think Suzuki knows the market, because it's a rational decision to buy a Vstrom. And a lot of the guys that buy BMWs, KTMs, they don't really ride off-road. And the same sort of off-roading that they consider to be off-roading is really just a bunch of like gravel roads. So those gravel roads are completely doable on this bike. But if you're a really good rider, you could ride a KTM Adventure, for example, a lot better off-road than this thing. So given equal experienced riders, the KTM Adventure, BMW GS, all of these bikes would be better off-road. But since people vary in skill, and most people do not ride past a certain limit, you'll never see that difference. Most humans are not going to be able to tell the difference very much. And we live in a place where motorcycle riders think that they're the gifts to mankind, but most people are not as good as they make themselves out to be. People buy SUVs with all-wheel drive and they never get them out of the city, and they never really need them for snow, because maybe in the East Coast, maybe in Colorado is different, but here all of these guys with SUVs that's all-wheel drive, they're not really using them, and it's only to go to Starbucks. And that's the reason Vstroms are good. People buy these things and they use market very cheaply, and I think this makes one of the best buys when it comes to motorcycling, because you can get these things for like $2,000, maybe like $2,500 to $3,500 for the first gen, maybe $4,000 for the second, etc. But because other bikes, the adventure segment is so popular, a lot of these don't hold their value. And it's not like it's a bad bike. This thing, the 650 from Suzuki, is the better V-Strom. A lot of guys like the 1000, but when you ride the 1000, you do realize that the 650 is the one you want to get. Not only it's got enough power to do everything, it handles much better in the corners. Man, that was some black ice on the road. I'm glad I wasn't leaning. It handles so much better than the 1000. It is lighter. You don't really need that much more power, especially in the adventure segment, because more weight off-road is really difficult. On the road you can ride a 1300cc bike and no problem, but off-road, you ever try to pick up a bike that weighs, you know, 800 pounds? It's freaking heavy, man. And yeah, I've dropped my bike a few times, so yeah, like it all adds weight off-road. And like what I don't understand, a lot of these adventure guys, they get a bike that's light, strong like an Africa Twin, and then they spend thousands modifying it, adding tons of weight with luggage and all of this sort of stuff. And the better thing is just for you to lose some weight. you know, go on a diet. Have you ever seen these guys that ride bikes? They're not exactly athletes.